Entire generations of traditional foods and the knowledge to grow them are vanishing from the earth at an alarming rate. This matters because the disappearance of seed varieties threatens not only our food supply, but also health benefits and the ecological balance that has sustained human life for centuries. For many indigenous peoples, seeds are more than just food. They are living links to ancestral insight, care, and resilience. The film Ganauwe Original Seeds explores the efforts of indigenous women who are cultivating these seeds and the wisdom they carry. Joining us now is the director and producer of the film, her third film on PBS stations, Katsitsionni Fox of Akwesasne. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Your film deals with some very important topics that affect all of us, no matter who we are on the planet.
Indigenous peoples are 5% of the world's population. They inhabit about a quarter of the surface of the globe. But inside of those indigenous communities is 80% of the planet's remaining biodiversity.
I wanted to start with some of the concerning points raised by your documentary. The film notes that in just 1 century, humanity has lost 75% of global seed diversity. What does this mean, and what are the consequences of this loss?
I think it's really dangerous that we've lost that much seed diversity. We depend on diversity for the plants to be able to adapt to what's happening. And there's a lot happening right now with climate change. So when you have like a diversity of seeds, you know, and people are growing them in different regions, they have that memory of what's happening in the environment, so they can start to adapt to things like drought or too much rain. So we need that. It's really important.
The film also notes the collapse of plant and animal biodiversity threatens the global food supply. What is indigenous seed stewardship, and why is it such a critical response to this crisis?
Well, I think for us as indigenous people, we really see the seeds as our relatives. So we take care of them in that way. So when we're saving those seeds, it's not the same as like a seed bank where you put them away and you freeze them in case there's an apocalypse or something like that. For us, when we're saving those seeds, we're making sure that we're planting them and we're in that relationship with them to keep them going for the future generations. And, you know, I think about that, you know, some of these seeds that we're planting today have been planted for generations and generations and generations, and here they are, they're still here today because my ancestors took that time to care for those seeds.
Well, that was beautifully put. There's a sobering history lesson in your film about the Sullivan campaign. How is this part of history so harmful to indigenous people and to the seeds themselves?
I think it's harmful because people don't know about it, for one thing. So the Sullivan campaign is something you don't usually learn about in history class, and I was a teacher for 20 years and know this to be true. So the Sullivan campaign was really food warfare against the Haudenosaunee people to try to destroy our food and destroy us in that way. They referred to George Washington as Lanatagaliaks, the town destroyer. He sent a massive army to destroy the Haudenosaunee through scorched earth warfare. So George Washington ordered General Sullivan to go and to burn down all of our food. So all of our corn, our beans, our squash, our fruits, everything, and right before the winter to try to starve us out. And it didn't work because we took care of each other. And a lot of our seeds were destroyed at that time, so we were lucky to have the ones that we still have today.
Well, that's a very discouraging part of your film, but an important part of history to know. There's a woman named Rowan White in your film. She says ancestors made promises to the seeds.
Our ancestors made promises and agreements to those seeds that we would take care of them, and those seeds would take care of us.
How does this reciprocal relationship challenge dominant agricultural systems today?
I think they're really different. So for the dominant agricultural systems, it's really based on money, you know, how much yield you can get, how much money you can make, you know, from producing the same kind of monocrops versus, you know, the way that we're caring for our seeds and planting them in intercrop planting, and it's much different. It's more of a relationship and watching how things are growing together and how things are working together, and also caring for the land at the same time, and we're not putting chemicals into the land and chemicals onto the food that we're later going to put into our bodies.
So there are 3 women in the film who make it their priority to save seeds from items such as corn, beans, and squash, and they're categorizing them and labeling them so that the uniqueness of the seed is not forgotten, and they're planting the seeds and harvesting the items. Why is it up to women to be primarily responsible for preserving the variety of seeds?
Well, it makes sense when you think about it, because as women, we carry seeds in our body, and we also care for our seed varieties that we're going to be planting. And for us as Haudenosaunee people, in our creation story, we talk about when Sky Woman fell from the sky world and she came to this world and she was carrying seeds. So she was our very first seed keeper. So that's why the women were responsible for caring for seeds. And we were kind of displaced from that with a lot of things that happened with colonization, and now stepping back into those roles again of caring for the seeds.
In general agriculture, from non-Indigenous farmers and big companies, they have a system of genetically modified organisms. And here's what Rowan White says in your film.
Genetically modified seeds are ones of dependence. You can't save those seeds from generation to generation. So you're always reliant upon those corporations and those companies to go back and buy those seeds again and again and again. So it actually disrupts that sovereignty that we have.
What is your reaction to what Rowan White said about genetically modified seeds?
I feel really sad when I think about genetically modified seeds, because they're taking our original seeds and they're manipulating them in ways that they're adding chemicals and they're adding pesticides, and they're changing the structure of those seeds in order to make more money, to make them yield more. I think we really need to think about, where our food is coming from and what's in our foods. And so those genetically modified organisms, when they're altering our seeds, we don't know really what they're putting in there, what kind of chemicals they're putting in those seeds. But when you plant it yourself, you know exactly what's going into those seeds. And when you're harvesting those seeds, you can collect those seeds and you can plant them again. So it's important to do that, to be collecting your own seeds and planting your own heirloom seeds. So that's food sovereignty.
Well, you mentioned food sovereignty. That's a term that comes up many times in your film. What is food sovereignty, and why is it so important to have and maintain?
I think for us, food sovereignty is being able to have your own food, being able to survive on your own food and know where this is coming from. And one of the reasons why I made this film is because I think today a lot of people don't think about where their food comes from. And it's such good medicine to, whatever you can grow in your garden, and you've put that love and that nurturing into that food, and it always tastes so much better to grow things yourself. In the film, Angie Ferguson talks about food sovereignty, and she's one of the people that I really think about when I think about that word, because what she does in her community of Onondaga is she's planting gardens, and she's trying to plant enough to get to have 7 years worth of food for her community. And that's amazing when you think about it. So she's growing enough food, and they're hunting and gathering syrup and doing all of these things so that they can sustain their own community for up to 7 years. And a lot of us don't think about up to 7 days of how much food we're going to have.
Those of us that put food away, that are growing our own food and that have our own food, will be the survivors no matter what happens.
I found what Angie Ferguson said in the film to be very compelling.
Me too. I think about the work Angie's doing in preserving food, and during the pandemic, they actually had to use some of the food storage that they had in Onondaga to feed their community. So she had saved up to 3 years worth of food for the Onondaga Nation, and she was able to support the community that way. That's food sovereignty.
Yeah, you're really seeing your ideals and your traditions at work during something like the pandemic. You're proving those theories absolutely correct.
As we have our seeds here, our seeds are listening to all the songs we're singing, the good words we're saying, the prayers that we put forward into the fire.
The people in the film treat seeds as sentient beings. They are listening to the songs, the language, and the prayers. How are seeds carriers of cultural memory and identity?
I think you can really feel that when you're working with the seeds. Sometimes I'm thinking about that when I'm planting my own garden, thinking about all the hands that have touched these seeds through the generations and all the knowledge that's carried in those seeds, the knowledge of the land, the knowledge of our ceremonies, the knowledge of our people, and even the knowledge of some of the things that we've survived as Indigenous people. The seeds have had to survive too. So they kind of parallel us in that way. So that's how I think about it, you know, like the knowledge that those seeds hold and carry.
Well, there's a touching scene where Dr. Rebecca Webster, who has devoted her home and family life to saving seeds, gets emotional.
I want it to be where my daughters and grandchildren and that generation in our community isn't going to have to try so hard to reclaim what they took from us. I'm so grateful for these seeds.
This really drives the point home that if you lose the seeds, you lose a huge part of the Indigenous culture.
Yeah, it's really a part of who we are. And in fact, for our people, we have a ceremony that we celebrate every year just to honor our seeds. So to kind of wake them up and tell them it's time to plant again. And we're going to plant them and they're going to take care of us.
Well, that's very beautiful. Your film has been shown in several film festivals. What's been the general reaction?
One of the reasons why I made the film was I really wanted to inspire people to want to plant their own food. And so that's one of the things I ask audiences, and I get excited when people are like, yeah, I want to plant some seeds. And so I hope people watching this film are inspired to want to grow their own food and, you know, whatever you can.
You've prepared teaching guides for classroom use about these topics. What is the value of reaching out to school-aged children with the subjects in this film?
Oh, I think it's so important. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we built a curriculum around this film, because we want young people to start thinking about the food that they're eating and the seeds that they're growing and understanding what are heirloom seeds and what are genetically modified seeds and why is it important to have diversity. So that's a perfect time for young people to learn more about seeds. And I do have a website for the film that has these the curriculum on it in case any teachers are interested in it. It's kanaueoriginalseeds.com.
Well, I can tell you're a teacher, and I think this film could be a wonderful teaching tool for Indigenous people. But what do you think is the reason why we should show this to non-Indigenous people?
I think they can learn from like the relationship that we have with seeds and thinking about seeds as something that you need to care for so that they'll be here for future generations.
Well, your documentary is both frightening and hopeful at the same time. And I want to thank you so much for coming and for teaching us about Indigenous stewardship.
Thanks for having me.
The film Kanenon Original Seeds debuts Monday, March 16th at 9 p.m. on Mountain Lake PBS. It repeats Wednesday the 18th at 5 p.m. Head to mountainlake.org for more information about the film and its air dates.
Spotlight is supported by the Glenn and Carol Pearsall Adirondack Foundation, dedicated to improving the quality of life for year-round residents of the Adirondack Park.